that looks good. Let's see how this goes.
Great stuff. Ready when you are. Ready when you are.
It's going to be going live now. 1, 2, 3, go. After all the technical hitches, press the button. So yeah, we should be live now.
Okay, so we'll just give it a few minutes then, and start to wait filter in.
Yeah, everyone on the Facebook channel, there is a bit of a delay due to OBS, so bear that in mind. And if there's any echoes,
might take just a few seconds to spot any new questions. Thanks.
Look, we've got some people coming in anyway. So it works.
Great stuff. Yeah, still waiting everyone just for people to go in. If you've got any questions, feel free to post them now.
Sorry about the delay. We did have some technical fun. Okay, okay. Thanks. What was it?
Jonathan, who are you hearing the echo from?
Is that better? Danny, if you speak.
Okay, yeah, that is better. I can't hear an echo coming back from you now either.
Wicked. Yeah, let's give it a couple more minutes. Yep, that seems to be what I've been told. Thanks, Michael. So let's wait for a few more.
We started a little bit late, might have confused a few people.
Right.
Do I have time to grab a cup of coffee?
Yeah, of course, feel free.
1 second.
Feel free. it might be worth getting started then.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so just wanted to say a massive thank you to Kyle before we start for joining us here today. So we're going to be talking about a few different things, including the most recent March core algorithm update nicknamed Florida 2. To get us started, Kyle, can you give us a little bit more of an introduction to yourself, what you do, a bit about Page Optimizer Pro?
Sure thing. My name is Kyle Roof. My agency is High Voltage SEO. We do local to national to international to e-com to everything in between. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and that's the office that I run. Our main office is in Berlin. We have an office in Melbourne. I do SEO all day, every day. I'm a lead tester for SIA, which is a group where I've, over the last 3 years, published over 300 tests on Google's algorithm. And I'm also the math behind and the co-creator of Page Optimizer Pro, which is an on-page tool. The concept behind the tool is that the secret is hiding in plain sight. Google shows you the sites that it likes. And it really likes those sites because of their on-page, their off-page, or a combination of the two. And so the idea is that if you put in the competitors that are getting points for their on-page, you can get a roadmap that Google will like for your particular keyword. And that's the goal of the tool, is then to make recommendations for your content to put it in line with, and places that you can get an edge based on what your competitors are doing.
Great, thanks. Okay, so jumping quickly to the core algorithm update, so Florida 2. Thought it'd be a nice starting point just to get your general impressions of the update, what actually changed compared to all of the rumors out there.
Well, so I don't really like the term "eat" very much. Expertise, like, let's just talk about that for a second. How would an algorithm know who is an expert and who isn't? Because something you have to think about is that this is an algorithm going through it and evaluating a web page and evaluating the content on that page. What could it do? Like, what are the things that it could indicate that this person is an expert? And you might say, well, maybe they've got links to degrees, like the universities they've been to. So then you'd have to get into, is Google taking the time to value judge that somebody went to Stanford is somehow better suited than somebody that went to Arizona State? You know, like that can't be a judgment that they're making. And also, going to college isn't the be-all to end-all, because you could have somebody that's been in the industry for 25 years and is more of an expert than anybody that just graduated from Stanford. So most of the things when you talk about setting up expertise, authority, trustworthiness, those type of terms, they're almost impossible for an algorithm to go through it and make an evaluation that would make sense, that you could then promote or demote a site based on those types of factors. So that's why I don't really like that term very much, just because I don't think Google's in that game. I don't think they're in. I really don't think they're in the value judgment game. You know, they're trying to give the most relevant results, and the cost that would be involved and the just, I don't know. It's turning SEO back into the wizardry that I really hate. You know, where it's magic and fairy dust and words like truthiness. You know, like things that don't exist. When really you're talking about an algorithm is math, and so it has to be math-based. It has to be something that they can put into buckets, you know, and categorize and evaluate that way. So there are things, though, that I think that an algorithm can do. An algorithm, and I think, you know, things that attack affiliate sites, is that Google really has a preference for real businesses. And that's not to say that an affiliate site isn't a real business, but often they're forms of lead gen, and I don't think that Google really likes that concept. And I think the reason is that often there isn't customer support. If somebody comes to a site and they buy a product and they consume that product, who do they contact if they have a problem? You know, and let's say something goes disastrously wrong. Who can they sue? Who could they get their money back from at a minimum, but who could then they also get restored from? And it's not going to be the affiliate site. You know, they would be the end product, but now we've got that affiliate in the middle. I can see why Google would then just prefer to show the actual company that's selling the product and not the affiliate site. And I think that's where that preference comes from. But then when you look at, well, what would a real company do, or what can they do, or what do they have on the site? A real company can show their address. A real company has an email. A real company has multiple emails because they have multiple departments. A real company has a phone number. A real company has a local phone number because they're a real business that they registered at a real place. Those are types of things that are very easy for an algorithm to come in and crawl on a site and identify and find. And so when I'm looking at sites that have been hit by EAT or Florida 2 or whatnot, most of them can't satisfy those requirements. You don't, when you get to the site, as a human being, you might see, okay, this is pretty trustworthy, but an algorithm might not be able to see that because it can't find an address. It can't find an email that's on the site. It can't find multiple departments. It can't find a local phone number. It can't find maybe even a regular phone or a 1-800 number. Those types of things, when you look at what an algorithm can do to see if this is a real thing. That's where I think these updates, what they're talking about and what they get into. One other thing that I really advocate is, did you know, everyone thinks that Google Plus went away? It didn't go away. The personalized site or the brand site where you could go in and just create one went away, but if you have a G Suite account, you have a Google Plus. So think about that as a trust signal. A real company can pay Google $10 a month and get their G Suite account. And then they have access to Gmail. Using that same Gmail, you can then set up your GMB, and that's a postcard verification. So Google can then verify that you're an actual place. But within that, you can use that same Gmail and you can verify your domain in YouTube. So you kind of create a triangle of verification. I'm paying them $10 for this, and I'm saying that I'm a real thing. They've sent a postcard that says I'm a real thing, and I've verified that I have a YouTube, a domain through YouTube. And then with that G+, you can put that as a real publisher on your site and say, we are a real entity. I don't think anybody that's been hit by any of these updates has done any of that. Like when somebody might say, well, I have an address on my site. Well, have you done all those other things? Because it's probably not just one thing. It's 60 things, and if you tick enough boxes or you don't tick enough boxes, that's when you're going to get tagged. One other thing to keep in mind is that because this is an algorithm, they're going to be comfortable losing some stuff on the ends, legitimate sites on the ends. They're going to be comfortable with that if they can get like that 80% range where they filter out the ones they don't like and keep the ones that they do. If they're within that target, I think they're comfortable with that loss on either end. So you might have an example of somebody that has done all those things and they got swept up, and that's just how it's going to be. But by and large, I haven't seen one site that's been hit that kind of satisfies those 8 or 9 things I just said that has done all of them.
It's really interesting. What are your general thoughts about using services like domains by proxy and things like that? Could it be impacting these sort of trust factors?
You mean to hide who owns the domain?
Yeah.
I can see a legitimate business reason for not wanting your name to be scraped because everybody knows that you can scrape that sort of stuff. So I personally don't think that that's much of an issue, but I could see the argument for it. Like if you go and look up who's, I think I was looking at Adidas the other day. You can't see who owns that website, or Nike. Like they don't, Mr. Nike isn't putting his information down. They put domain privacy on there. So and that's an extreme example because they're obviously a really huge thing. But what I would do is I'd go in, I'd look at people in my own niche, legitimate companies in my own niche. What are they doing? And if they're doing domain privacy and doing just fine, then I think you're fine.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What other kind of things do you think come into EAT? I know it's been talked about a lot, and there's a lot of things that it just can't because they aren't algorithm based. So people are on about making sure you've got bios for your authors on pages, and a lot of very soft end of SEO things that are very hard to prove or disprove. What has your experience been with a lot of those very small on-site changes?
That kind of stuff is low-hanging fruit. It takes 2 minutes to do, and if it could possibly help you, I would do it. And, when you think about this isn't like 4 factors, it's probably 60 factors or 100 factors. Those might be towards the bottom and they might have less weight, but worthwhile doing. What I would actually really recommend, because again, we're trying to establish, I think entity is a better term. Entity just means person, place, or thing. Mm-hmm. Can Google understand that this is a person, a place, or a thing? It's super easy for me to put up a picture of a random person and then put, this is Jill and she's an expert and she went, and it just have text, right? It becomes a little more difficult if I actually have a LinkedIn profile right there for Jill. And then I also have her Twitter handle, and then I also have her Facebook. I mean, you could fake those things, but if you've got 10 of them, so that's 10 times 3 that you're faking, it becomes less likely that you're faking it. Like that's really a lot of effort. So when you think about, if you're going to do that, that's what I would do. I would try to establish that this is an actual person. They actually have a LinkedIn profile. They have, or whatever the niche might be. If it's a health thing, they've got something in ZocDoc or Real Self or something like that. They have those profiles in appropriate places.
Yeah, I think the point that you make about effort is a really important one as well. If it's difficult to do and not many people would go to that extent, then it's probably the right thing to be doing.
Well, because who does it are real people. Real people do that. Real companies do that. Real entities do these things because they can, because they're real. So like, the meta point here though is like having a LinkedIn profile isn't gonna protect you from anything. That's not the point. But the point is these little cumulative things might add up so that when an algorithm is crawling through and if you can tick the box, then that's where I think the safety comes from.
Yeah, it's just that lots of little things building up a lot of effort really to prove that you are a real entity and that you do deserve to rank. Do you think there's anything else beyond the EAT side of things that went into the Florida update? Anything that was kind of hidden behind the scenes that wasn't really talked about that much?
That I don't know. What we just talked about, what I think is going on, I don't think is very talked about. People want to talk about expertise or authority, and I really don't know what those things are. I don't know how you would find them. And the smallest little thing for Google to do costs millions of dollars. So they need to make real decisions on, okay, this is what we're going to do to evaluate these things. Otherwise, it becomes exponentially too expensive, and they are in the business of making money.
Yep.
So think of it from a point of an algorithm. What could they actually check? What could they actually source and do? And since they already have a crawler that's coming to your site anyway and looking for certain factors, it's not that much to then ping a few more factors and put it into a certain category. So I would think of it in those terms.
Yep. Do you think links will also factor into kind of EAT and establishing that authority as well?
That's an interesting idea. Like if you're on like you have to figure there's probably a spam score range, right? It's just one of the things like, so they're missing all these factors and their spam score is leaning this way. Yeah, F them. Yeah,
I've definitely seen more kind of big sites with high domain authorities drifting up the results compared to some of the smaller affiliate sites with really high quality content actually drifting down.
Sure.
There seems to have been that slight shift towards thinking more about the strength of the domain rather than just the strength of the page.
I could see that. I think that's valid.
Okay. If you was going to suggest that affiliates make one change right now, what would that change be?
Put an address on your site. Put an address and a phone number.
Yeah.
And then mark that up in schema.
Okay. Would you also think about setting up like a GMB listing?
For sure.
Okay. On the GMB listing side of things, do you think that actually has any influence outside of local rankings? So I've heard a bit of discussion on this in the past. That, it only matters if you're a local business. What's the point of getting GMB set up if you're trying to rank nationally or internationally?
It goes to what I was talking about before with establishing that you're an entity, that you're a real company. Because who does it are real companies, even national ones. In the agency, we have plenty of national brands and they all have GMBs. Because they can. Like, the first thing you hear about, when you talk to affiliates about putting well, I work from home. I don't want to put my home address on my site. But real businesses actually do work from home too. They've all figured this one out. So take a second to figure it out, and establish a business address.
With the, in terms of the business address, would it be possible for an affiliate to use, say, a virtual office address? Is Google smart enough to know that it's a virtual address and not necessarily a real address?
The ones that I think you run into trouble with are like Regis, where I think Google understands that people just spam that to death. But there are plenty of legitimate companies that work out of co-working spaces and use those as their addresses. So my company does. We have a co-working space. That's where we work out in Berlin. We rent a desk, or it's a big table, if you will, in a giant place. But a whole bunch of companies are there. But we have a specific address that is our actual address, that goes to a specific mailing spot that is ours at that large thing. And then you have to think about too is there are large buildings with lots of different offices in them, so they're basically sharing an address and it's just suite numbers. That's normal and fine. I would just and within those co-working spaces, a lot of them have where you can rent a desk even part-time, and that will give you a mailing address, and you can use that as that's where my business runs out of, and that's completely fine.
Cool.
Okay. I think another interesting thing would be to talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing with Page Optimizer Pro, and how we're starting to rethink how we actually do SEO on a daily basis, because it's kind of the big movement now is SEO as a science rather than SEO as witchcraft, pretty much. So I think it would be really helpful to talk to affiliates briefly about kind of what the basic principles are, why SEO as a science is important, and how a tool like Page Optimizer Pro would help them on that journey.
A few years ago, when I started working on these concepts, and we used within our own agency, I built Page Optimizer Pro for myself. And actually, first we were doing it by hand, and I was like, this is the worst. There has to be a better way. And then that's when it's kind of turned into a small internal tool, and then that's how it's, over the last 3 years, kind of grown to what it is now. But what I realized is that a lot of people miss the point on optimization, or over-optimization or under-optimization. They look at a page as a whole and say, this page is over, or this page is under. And what I realize is that it's very rare for an entire page to be over or an entire page to be under, because a page consists of several signals. Some of your signals might be over, and some of your signals might be under. And what I realize is that most pages are both over and under optimized at the same time. And a lot of people miss that point entirely. They just look at the one page and say this page is over. So what they do, if they think the page is over, they start reducing randomly. And so some signals that may have been over move into a good spot, but those ones that were good are now under, and vice versa. They might say, this page is under, so they just start throwing stuff in randomly. And they might move some signals up into a good range, but they pushed those that were good into a red zone at over. So you need to evaluate things signal by signal. So we're talking about your H1s, H2s, H3s, H4s, paragraph text, image all bold, italic, any of those on-page things that you think of need to be evaluated separately, and they need to be looked at separately. And so each one will have different requirements for placement of your exact keyword, placement of your variations, placement of your contextual terms, whichever version that you like to call them, LSI, NLP, TF-IDF, all those things. They all then factor in, and so you want to look at each signal like, am I ticking the box for those things, those three things, the exact placement, the variation placement, and the LSI in each specific signal? And then once you start to evaluate things that way, that's how you can really have on-page do a lot of heavy lifting for you in your organic. Usually, you should be able to push most pages, even in very difficult niches, to somewhere between page 2 and 4 just with on-page. And if it's a little bit easier, sometimes you can get to page 1 with minimal work just on page itself.
Yep, definitely agree with that. You mentioned over-optimization, so how dangerous do you actually believe over-optimization is?
Where people miss that is that they use some general heuristic, a rule of thumb about what over-optimization is. And it's important to understand that keyword usage varies keyword to keyword, niche to niche. Google rewards different things for different niches. So what might be over for one niche is under for another. And that's also a very largely missed point. So when somebody says, I think my page is over-optimized, how are you determining that? Is the first thing you want to know. Like, well, I just use the keyword a lot. Well, that means nothing. Until you've compared against what Google is rewarding, what actually exists in that SERP, then you can know if you're over or under. I would say that I worry about over-optimization last. I take things where I either don't have something in the signal or I'm apparently under. I move those up first before I do any decreasing. Where I found that you can actually harm your page quickly is by decreasing usage before you've moved everything else up. So, and that's actually in the best practices of POP, and it doesn't matter if you use POP. I would read our best practices, because you can take those concepts and apply to any tool or any situation, and you're going to do better SEO. You're going to do better with POP, but you will just do better SEO by just running through our best practices. But do all your increases first, expand the page first before you do any reduction.
Okay. And what other sort of on-page factors do you look at beyond the more traditional keyword usage, headers, and general metadata type factors? What's really important these days?
Well, within the tool, the things that are important now have been the same. The top four things, the top four places where you can put a keyword are in your URL, your meta title, your H1, and in your paragraph text. Those are the top four, and they have been. The next set would be the rest of your H2s, say H2, or excuse me, your H tags, so H2, H3, H4, and anchor text. After that, then you're looking at things like image alt, bold, italic, and then perhaps things within schema probably land in that group. And then after that, then you're looking at things that are even less. So open graph, Twitter cards, meta description probably, other tags that exist in your source code, like if people have named HTML classes or stuff like that, that would all then fall into those categories then.
Yeah, so all of the things that are really visible to the user first, and then drifting off into the things that are less visible when you actually load the page and first take a look at it.
That's right. The only exception to that would be the number one factor is meta title. So you often see that within the SERPs, but you may not see that on the page.
Yeah, I think that the fact that you see it in the SERPs is probably exactly what makes it the most important. It's that first touch point with Google, really.
Right. I totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. Martin, have you been gathering questions as we've been going along?
Yep, I've got some questions here. I'll start off with the ones that are in the comments already. Let me just pull those up. And of course, I can't get all of them because I'm on the wrong screen. Let's have a look. Right. Let's get onto the right screen. So Suraj says, or asks, while using Pretty Links plugin, should he add the links so that they're 301, 302, or 307?
What does Pretty Links accomplish? It makes your URLs look nicer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what is it doing after that?
It's we tend to use it. Well, a lot of affiliates tend to use it to redirect through to the affiliate links. So send them to the MoreNiche tracking code links.
Cloak and affiliate links.
Yeah.
Gotcha. If you believe Google, they say that they treat 302s and 301s the same. If you like that, but that's no. I don't know that that's true. And also, other search engines might not be the same, so I would go with the traditional 301 if you have that choice.
Cool. And then Kirit asks, what would you prefer, links from relevant sites that have low traffic, low DA, or links from higher DA that are not relevant to the niche that they're in?
That's kind of that fun merry-go-round kind of question, right? The chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
I would. So what I like to do is actually go with the highest DA, for lack of a better term, site that I could get. So I would put my money into getting that link, and then I would take those other relevant links and push them to that rather than to my site. So I'll take the highest one that I can get, and I like it better if it's a more generalized category. So if I've got, say, a health site, I wouldn't necessarily want to get something that isn't health related unless it's a really general site. That high DA site is super general. Then I'll feel better about it, and I'll point that one in, and then I'll point those other lower ones that are usually cheaper to get to that page or whatever I'm doing to get that link to my site.
Cool.
That's interesting. Can I follow up on that a bit as well? Do you think it is really important to build those second tier links from the pages that are linking to you?
So what I do is I spend more time on that. I'll get a handful of links going in, and then I will drive traffic or drive links to them. One other point, though, is that I rarely drive links anyway to my target page, because I'll usually set up a silo structure of supporting content on my site, and I'll interlink that and also the target page. And so usually the link that I'm getting, that I'm pointing to my site, I'm actually pointing into my silo and not directly to my target page. So I'll juice up my whole silo that way.
Makes sense. And then that silo will feed down link juice to all of the relevant pages in that section and boost rank.
And then the target page that I'm ultimately trying to rank. And my silo post will only point to one target page. So as I do my link building, I might build links to this silo page or post. I might build links to that silo page or post. They all juice up the silo, and then I'll link up to my top level page.
Great.
And then the other thing that does, though, if worst case scenario, something's gone horribly wrong, I can just kill that silo post and cut off all the links that may be doing harm if something's gone terribly, terribly wrong.
Okay, and sorry, quickly follow up on that bit as well. Links that are doing harm, do you believe that links can do major damage now?
It still seems possible. I mean, it still seems, people do report it, like, hey, I got 5,000 links and things tanked and haven't come back, so it's still possible. I imagine Google ignores more links than they did before, but I think you still can. I mean, negative SEO still exists.
Okay, it's great perspective. I've always been on the other side of the fence, thinking that Google have been trying to avoid negative SEO more and more, and are trying to move away from penalizing to just ignoring links. But yeah,
I think that's true. I do think that's true, but I think it still exists.
Yeah. I suppose it's an algorithm. There's always those fringe parts at the edges where they can't catch things.
Right.
Sorry, Martin, back over to you with the questions before I hijack the whole session.
No worries, no worries. So I've got one here. It's quite a long one, so I'll shorten it. Basically assuming that Google is a pile of rubbish and that humans are gone and it's all robots now. What do you think about blog comments? Is it still worth manually going through them and adding blog comments for the look of fresh content? Or are those kind of a waste of time now and just ignore dealing with comments?
I like the foundation of that question because I'm not sure that I agree with it. I don't think Google is a pile of crap. And I don't think that we've gone completely to the way of robots. So that premise aside, the question is, should we have blog comments or not, right?
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden your word count is significantly higher than, say, your competitors. And they're constantly probably putting in keyword rich or variation rich content, and that can skew numbers, right? I think that's what we're talking about. So what I found is that if you've landed on page one, you've gotten there and now you have an active page and people are coming and they're leaving comments, that's a good thing, because keep in mind those pages that are ranking well set the bar. So if you can get on page one and then you can reset the bar to something that is not attainable, you will never leave page one. And blog comments have the ability to do that. So you might have written, say, a 2,000 word article on something and you got there, and then after a year now that's 10,000 words because you have all that content, and if you're still on page one, you probably can't move off of page one. You've reset the bar to something that somebody else can't just go and write a 10-page article or 10,000 word article and show up. You've probably hit a point of over optimization for where you were previously, but you've again reset the bar to what is over and what is under for this particular keyword. So blog comments have a way to do that, and I think that's what they do. Like when you look at competitor sites and you're trying to get into a niche and you're like, well, I mean, they've only got 1,000 words on that page, but they've got 9,000 words of, how are they doing that? That's probably how they did it. They had that 1,000 words, got ranked to that point, and then they have reestablished what that is acceptable for that keyword. So I would use blog comments for that purpose. Now, if you're on page 5 and you start to try to manufacture blog comments to do that, that isn't going to be helpful at all. You're not going to suddenly start moving up the ranks to do it. I would think that if I'm on page one and I'm getting those comments, I wouldn't worry about it. One other point, let's say you're sitting at number 5 on page one and you got those comments, you may or may not move off of the 5 spot. You can probably get to page one for just about any term, but once you're on page one, there's a lot that goes into, you may not move. You might be locked in that spot. And so if I'm looking at the 5 spot and trying to move to 4 or something like that, you want to move real low and slow with any changes that you do, because there's a better chance of you dropping than of you going up.
Cool. Just out of interest on that as well, when people are adding blog comments, do you never worry that they're potentially undoing a lot of your on-page optimization and actually, effectively you could end up with 9,000 words that only mentions your main keyword a couple of times? Is that okay?
Right, that's the point though. If you've gotten to the point that you're ranking well, I think it's the kind of thing that can lock you in to that well-ranking spot, then move you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you might move out and into under optimization for what it was when you initially did it, but you're not moving. You know, you're staying in that spot. Where I would start to be concerned if you see kind of that slow decline where, okay, we were at 5, now we're at 6, now we're at 7, yeah, something's going on there. But otherwise, if you're not moving, you know, I wouldn't remove them. I wouldn't change anything.
I think that's really good feedback.
Cool. So, on keyword over optimization, what's your opinion on keyword optimization and keyword stuffing for non-local search phrases with no countries, cities, or geographical mentions inside?
For me, it doesn't matter what the keyword is. It whether it's a local or a national, the idea is figure out what that range is that Google's rewarding now, and that's what you want to shoot for. And you won't know what is over, what is under, what is stuffing, what is not stuffing until you actually see that. Because I've seen people say, like, look at all these sites on page 1, they're all stuffing. I'm like, no, they're not. They're in the zone that Google's rewarding for that particular keyword. That's what that is for that keyword. It's not stuffing at all. That's the range. If you feel like ranking for that keyword, you're going to have to do that. You know, or like, I've written mine correctly. No, you haven't. Like, you've written how you want to write it, but that's not what this keyword wants.
I think we quite often make that mistake as SEOs to think that we can work in isolation and ignore what the search results are actually telling us. And yeah, the answer is right there in front of us if we just look at what the top competitors are already doing.
No, just write good content. Google will reward it.
Cool. So look, trying to work through my own writing on here, the way I formatted it. So, setting link earning aside, what are your thoughts on adding content to category or product level pages to improve their rankings? For example, how much content would you recommend and where would it sit on the page?
So again, I love these kind of questions. I get them a lot on pop support too. It'll say like, you know, I have a product page and I'm going up against product pages and pop says I need to add 500 words to this page. Where should I write it? Where do your competitors have it? You know, it's the easiest thing. You know, like someone says, I searched for something and I didn't find it. Where'd you search? Your garage? Because it's in Google. Like, look at what they've done. If you see that your competitors are doing that, you know, like a tool like Pop or another analysis tool tells you need to add content, look and see what your competitors have done. If they're doing it and they're winning, that's what you need to do. It's the easiest answer. But you know what? Most people don't look at their competitors. I've actually realized that. Most people don't actually click and open and look at it. They take their competitors, or the ones they think they are, and they put them into a tool like Pop, or they put them into Moz or Ahrefs, and then they're just looking at the data that way without actually looking at what those pages consist of. You know, it's like trying to build something looking at like just the user manual, but the user manual not in sequence, you know, and with no pictures. Yeah, so like go and look at what your competitor's doing, and then you'll know where you should put that content and how much content you should put.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's have a look. So the way Pop works, it requires loads of tests, changes on a one-by-one basis. So couldn't Google pick up on these types of actions when somebody is constantly making minor on-page changes?
So that person, I saw that, I think that was one of the ones previously. One thing you really need to do is read those best practices in Pop, because we don't suggest making one change at a time. We suggest making small groups of changes and then see how your page performs. So make 3 or 4 or 5 changes perhaps, watch the page, and then make a few more, because your page might go up and you know, okay, that was significant, we're good. The page could go down and be like, okay, that wasn't it, and then you can undo. What happens is a lot of people do one of two things. They make 400 changes at once and then launch, or they do that, they make a change and then rerun the tool and then make a change and then rerun the tool and make a change and rerun the tool. Those are not the right ways to do it. Make a few changes, see how they go, and leave it. But I think to that person's question about will Google pick up that you're making changes, it's not that. I think Google will miss that you've made changes. It takes the crawler several times through a page to pick everything up. So if you're making incremental changes, it's possible that a change that you made has just been missed, because the crawler portion that actually is looking at that section came through and you didn't have it at that time, and then missed that you made the change, and then a different part of the crawler is coming through looking at something else. So that's why you want to make your changes in small bunches and then let them sit for maybe what would be 2 cache dates when cache dates are normal. So maybe and that's usually 5 to 7 days. So maybe 10 to 14 days is a good number after you made some changes, just to let things go and see how they do.
Okay. And if the results go down straight away, would you straight away presume that that's a failure and revert the changes? How long would you leave things?
About that 10 days, 10 to 14 days is what I would do. But almost always that's because somebody reduced first.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 99.8% of the time, somebody reduced something and they dropped, and they're like, I did it this 3 days ago and I dropped. Did you reduce? Yes. Did you read the best practices? Yes. What they say is that don't do any reducing. Well, I can't help you. Don't do that.
What about the situations where you kind of see that yo-yo effect, where you bounce between several positions, and Google seems to be almost deciding where to put you? How long do you think you should wait in that period where you are bouncing around?
That might be something else, because you often see where you're bouncing from between 8 to 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bottom of page 1, top of page 2, and then there's maybe another section that looks like probably 13 to 18, right? You see those kind of bounces, and they pick up in frequency too, right? Then below that, from say 19 to 30, that all seems to be, those look like groupings to me. What that tells me is if you're bouncing in between them, that you basically have the same score that those other pages have. There's probably a normalization that happens within those groupings. So they've all been grouped together, they have a normalized score, and then they're placed at random within the group because they're all basically the same site as far as Google is concerned. They all have the same score. So in that situation, you probably want to do something to try to shake it up. Do something outside of what that grouping is doing to see if you can't get out of that grouping and move up into the next set.
Yeah.
Cool. Another question on the comments. In terms of guest posts, do you do full keyword research and have those articles written to the same standards as you would for content on your money sites?
Well, all the stuff that I do, I show my clients. So I'm all client-based. I don't have any affiliate sites, and so I write it to the point that I feel comfortable showing it to a client. That they want to read it, and I think that's probably a decent standard. When you're doing that sort of thing, it should be a good enough link that it should be okay to pay somebody $40 to $50 to write it, right? So it's at least passable. So I think if you maybe went by that standard, that's probably a decent heuristic.
Yeah. The other thing for me as well would be a level of plausible deniability. You're not just creating those blog posts for creating blog posts. They should look like real posts. If someone does a manual review, it shouldn't jump straight out that this is a guest blog.
Right. It should look like a real thing.
Yeah. As soon as you're doing that, you're leaving yourself wide open for manual penalties down the line.
This goes back to the argument about eat and don't fake it. Do it. Turn Pinocchio into a real boy. Don't pretend to be a company and then try to figure out how to fake it, actually be a company, and then you're fine. Then you don't have to worry about how to figure this out because you're a real company and you're just doing real things.
Yeah.
I think affiliates get into this fake concept too much. Just do it for real. It'll probably take the same amount of time.
That is really good feedback, because it is an easy habit to fall into of, how do I trick Google, when really you could just work with them and it's easier sometimes.
Yeah, just do it for realsies. You can do spam in bulk, right? But then that spam gets caught, or it becomes ineffective, so then you have to redo it. So if you think about the time and money and effort that you're constantly doing that in bulk to the result, you'd probably get the same sort of thing with less headache and less panic that all your balls are going to suddenly fall at once and Google's going to wipe you out if you just did it legit from the beginning.
Cool.
Okay, back to you, mine.
So we mentioned it before we went live, but I thought I'd ask the question again since the person's on the actual chat. So how would you prevent a website has copied content from an affiliate's website? They've outranked the original content, and then since then that website has removed that content, so it's just a 404 error, but that 404 page is still outranked the affiliate content.
In my experience, usually 404s flush out of the index in a couple of weeks, like 2 to 3 weeks. But I think you might have mentioned that this 404 has been there for quite some time.
Yeah.
Did the original site, did they take it down? Did they take it down because they got, this guy was like, hey, that's my content, and then they took it down?
I think it's a site that's gone through lots of different sites and kind of copied content from a wide variety of websites, got it all ranked, and then I think have gradually just removed that content now that they've got the rankings. So I don't think it's a specific, they've gone after a specific affiliate, it's literally just scraping the internet of content and outranking it all.
So maybe what I would do is I would contact them and say, hey, this was my page, you stole my content. It's now a 404, and that's great, but can you make it a 410?
Mm-hmm.
A 410 is permanently removing something from you're telling the search engine, this page doesn't exist, but it's gone. And so if you can do that, maybe send a little nastygram over to them, like, hey, this should be a 410. They might do it that way. That might get it out of there.
Cool.
And then after that, I don't know, can you do a DCMA takedown on a page that's a 404?
It's a bit challenging, yeah.
Yeah.
If there's still a cache version showing on Google as the old content, then I suppose you potentially could.
Yeah, maybe that would be an alternative as well.
Yeah, viewing the cache version is probably one of the things that most people forget to do. Is like, even if it's 404, if Google's still showing the cache version, then yeah, there's still
then
like
it's not a 404. Yeah, it's not a 404 to Google. And that's another thing. Send some links to it, because then that'll get Google to crawl the SERPs again, and then maybe see that the page is gone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That is a very nice, cheeky way of doing it, actually.
Yeah, so it's like sprinkle in some links across the top 5 sites. Yeah, and then, so nothing major, but just get Google's attention and get Google to crawl the SERP in depth again.
That's a good idea. Back onto GMB, how important would you say GMB profiles are for national businesses that don't have any storefront?
I've got plenty of those clients, and they all have GMBs. I recommend it. I mean, you don't have an actual storefront, but you do have a place, right? There is a brick and mortar somewhere. It has to be. Otherwise, it's not a real company.
Yeah. And we have affiliates that focus on a wide range of countries, and are there any ways of ranking well for a specific country rather than just getting the domain name, i.e. .co.uk? For example, could they geotag images, add the country in the content, things like that?
I think those are all good ideas. You can also use hreflang to identify that this is the location and this is the specific language that's being used. And that's, within hreflang, you can also say this is, English UK, English US, English CA, just to specifically say that, okay, this is an English version of the page, but it's for this location or region.
Would you go as far as doing it in Search Console and targeting country there?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, can you do multiple locations within Search Console now? I think one domain is one location in Search Console, but you could do subdomains.
You can do subdomains. I believe you can even do subfolders and get away with it.
That's what I'm not sure on. I don't know in recent, because this stuff changes a bit, but previously I know you couldn't. Previously I know that you could claim a subdomain and put a location on that subdomain. And you couldn't do a subfolder. I'm not sure if you can do a subfolder now. If you can, then that's exactly the way to do it. Because that's the easiest. Subfolders and subdirectories are always easier to manage than subdomains, because the subdomain, then you're really creating a new site. And that can be a pain depending on the plugins and whatnot that you're using to try to keep everything together. So if you can do it for convenience purposes, it's always easier after the .com. So if you can claim a subfolder or subdirectory within Search Console and say that this is my, the French or the, France version and the UK English version and the Danish version, if you can do that on that side, that's how I would do it.
Cool.
That's one worth having to play with afterwards to see.
I'm not
pretty
100%
sure you can now.
Okay.
Have you ever discovered any evidence of significant Google algo updates that Google hasn't disclosed? For example, an algo focused entirely on reviews or how passionately content is written.
Yeah, all the time. So I assume you guys are familiar with Quora, right? As a tool. Got on your radar? Quora, I think it's like 600 factors now, 700 factors, but basically, for those that aren't familiar, what it does is it runs through the top 100 results for a particular keyword, and it looks at 600 potential things, and Ted Kubitis, who does the tool, his thing is like, we are factor agnostic. We don't care if somebody says this is or is not. He doesn't care about that at all. It's a thing that exists. The tool crunches it, and then it gives you, with 2 different correlational analysis, what could be moving the needle for that particular keyword. And it's going to run through all that analysis, and you might get 50 to 100 things. So what I do when I start with a client, and you should do this with your affiliate sites as well, is I run a Quora report. And then when it looks like some shakeup has happened, you can rerun a Quora report, and then you can do a differential and see which factors shifted as to what are more important now, and then you know what happened in any update. But then if you run them regularly, you can start to see there are shifts that aren't major updates at all, that aren't announced, but happen for your particular keyword. So then you can actually see your own updates. It's the way to update proof yourself. It's super easy. You can also do it from a small extent in Pop, because you can see that the sites that moved up for a particular keyword, they have now shifted the range of what's over and what's under. Like for the targets, so that those are the new sites that are in, put those new sites in Pop, and then you can see what the shift was. And you can see what's more important now and what's less important.
Cool.
I think it's also important to reiterate the fact that Google only announced core algorithm updates, and that's only something they started doing recently. So typically Google have done a pretty good job of hiding updates. And if you look at some of this...
Oh, I'm sorry, please. Please.
If you look at some of the smaller updates, some of the ones like related to payday loans and things like that, that only affect a real small segment of the searches as well, then yeah, there's even less noise about them. So yeah, it's quite reasonable for something just to hit, say, affiliate marketing, and not many people talk about it.
No, that's exactly right. The only reason that payday loans became a thing is because so many people were paying huge money to win those terms. But you know, if you've got people going after, I don't know, bath towels, the bath towel niche doesn't have a lot of people screaming and yelling when things start to shift around. But you know, there was that little update in that particular niche.
Cool. Google recently announced that they haven't supported rel previous next for some time. Some SEOs think that the hreflang is next on the hit list. What do you think?
I don't know. I never believe those announcements anyway, because they usually are left up to interpret. Usually what you just said is somebody else's interpretation of Google's announcement. Mm-hmm. So for that, I haven't spent a lot of time, but I personally have not put eyeballs on what they've said about that. Never get your information from tweets, ever. Like they do have the official webmaster thing when they do make those announcements. They post it there, but then you also need to read it. So for example, with the Google Plus, everyone said Google Plus is gone. That's because they got that from a tweet. If they read what Google said, they're taking it away from the consumer side, the personal side. They're taking away brand pages. But if you have a G Suite account for businesses, it still exists, and they're expanding it. Not only does it exist, they're expanding features in 2019. That's what they said in the thing. But everybody saw the tweet that said G Plus is gone, and then they were like, oh, G Plus is dead. That's it. So I feel like, and it could be that rel next and previous are gone, but I need to put eyeballs on it and see what they actually said, and then we can sort of figure that one out.
Yeah, think about the intent as well. So if rel previous and next have gone, then it probably means that Google have found an easier way to identify previous and next pages.
Right.
So yeah, why would they get rid of language tags unless they had another easier way of identifying it?
Exactly.
In which case, why does it even matter? Why is it worth discussing? Because having it there does no harm, not having it there does no harm. It's kind of one of those things that's by the by.
Yeah, and I mean, worst case scenario, you could have something that says next and previous on your page, and it's just a link, and it goes to the next page, and then Google will crawl it. I mean, the concern is that you're using next and previous, and Google isn't going to get to your pages, right? So they're not going to get deeper into pagination. But if you've got a link, they follow links, they're going to get there anyway. So maybe that's what it is. Like, well, we don't need that because we're just following the links. But again, I need to put my own eyeballs on that.
Makes sense. So one affiliate said that they were once told that a great way to write meta descriptions is to seek inspiration from the ads that appear for a given keyword. The logic being that the ads go through numerous iterations to find the right wording for the best results. What are your thoughts?
I love that. I actually do that for myself because it's the fastest way to test meta descriptions and meta titles for CTR purposes. Now, the only thing is you're making a really big assumption that that person is doing it right, and they could just be spending a lot of money. So don't just take it just because it's there, it's the best one. But as a practice, it's a great thing to do. Run a small AdWords campaign, put in your titles and your descriptions, split test them, and then see which ones win.
Yeah, and also think why people are using AdWords as well. They're not really that interested in great click-through rates. They're interested in sales.
Right.
So if you're getting a high click-through rate, you're just paying more money. You want sales to convert. So yeah, you'll get very engaging metadata by using adverts, but you might not get very well crafted for SEO metadata.
Right.
I think they're a little bit different in some respects, even though there are some comparisons.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that they're there just because they're paying. And it's not the best or well crafted, but I think it's the theory. I think is correct.
Yeah. If you're testing yourself, then yeah, you can see which is the best from click-through rates. That's an amazing thing to do.
For sure.
Right. And what are your opinions on Web 2.0s?
I use them. I love them. One of the first things I'll do is do a round of branded Web 2.0s for a client. So, brandname.wordpress.com, brandname.tumblr.com, brandname.issue.com, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just use them as citations. So I'm not putting content on them. I'm not blogging on them. I'm just saying that this is this company, this is what they do. These are their open hours. This is their address, that sort of thing. So I'm putting map information on there and then linking it in. And that's one of the first things I'll do so that I can get kind of a nice little round of first very safe links kind of trickling in that makes sense. But it's also, again, to establish that entity concept. We're a real thing. We own this brand name. This is us. And so as those pages are crawled and indexed, that they've got a link going into a page that I want them to go to say, like, this is what we're doing. This is who we are.
Makes sense. With anchor text, are you following any kind of formula, such as, say, 20% branded, 10% generic, etc.?
I think maybe people can guess what my answer might be on this, and that's where you just look at your competitors and what they have done for that particular keyword, and then you can get the formula that you should be following. That's what I do. And what you'll find is that exact match anchor text is used a lot more than any guide is going to tell you. When you actually do the evaluation, you see, like, man, these guys are using exact match anchors like 60% of the time. How are they number one? That might be part of it. So what I do is I look at I do competitor analysis, and I follow what is needed for that particular SERP.
Cool. So look at Facebook. So let's say you rank on page 1, but you have way more content than your competitors. How would you go ahead and optimize your site using POP?
So if you feel you need to reduce, content, you never just want to delete it. I take that content and I turn it into a supporting post or page for that. So then you can create a silo out of that content. But the other thing to keep in mind is that if you're on page 1 and whatever position you're in, there's a chance that you're never going to move any higher. There's a chance that that's it. Like you've made it to page 1, congrats. But that might be as far as your page can go for a million reasons. So if you start reducing, you have a much higher chance of dropping than you do of gaining. So you want to go very low and slow with that concept. And again, I wouldn't just delete it from my site. The first thing I would do is I'd take a chunk, I'd link to that chunk, and I'd link back up, and then I would slowly start to create a silo out of content that I'm removing from that page, is how I would do it. Mm-hmm. But be very cautious doing that.
Cool. And another one from the same person, and let's say you rank in position 3 already. Would POP make sense here at all, since you can only add 2 competitors into POP, or does it come down to user metrics at this stage?
Well, no, not at all, because just because you're in the 3 spot doesn't mean that you're doing better on page than the number 4 guy. His on page might be better than yours, but you're ranking for other reasons. Mm-hmm. So what you still want to do is you still want to look at those sites that are doing good on page 1 and even into page 2. Those would go into to POP to get their values. But now what you want to do within POP is that we have an option to choose focus competitors. So let's say you put in 7 competitors, those 2 above, 5 below you, and then you could choose those 2 that are above you as focus, and then you're going to get segmented data. So you can see the entire group, but then you could see those 2 because it's possible that they are way outside the group, and then you realize, oh, I need to add. Or they could be way under the group and be like, oh, maybe I should actually bring things a little bit down based on that. So you can see the entire group of good on page, but then you can also see those 2 that are above you and get some comparison data to make some good choices.
Oh, wicked. Makes perfect sense. So obviously some of our affiliates may not know much about POP. Would it be possible to get an overview of it and where they can find it?
Sure, it's pageoptimizer.pro is the website. If you sign up, we do take a credit card on sign up, but you get 7 days, and you get in addition to the 5 you would get for the loan, you get 5 additional credits to run reports. And if you cancel within that 7 days, you won't be charged. And the low end package is $10, by the way. So we are trying to make it the goal of trying to provide the most data science possible with the lowest price possible. Mm-hmm. Our unlimited package is $39. That's as high as we go in terms of a single user. So when you get into the tool, you put in your target page, you put in your keyword, and you put in your competitors, and then we crunch all that together, and then we make recommendations for your page to improve based on what those competitors are doing. If you haven't built the page yet, you can check a box, and then it won't evaluate your page. Or let's say you've got content, you could actually copy and paste that in within HTML tags and run things that way. We do have, not to be pitchy, we do have a special going on right now because we have an agency user where you could actually assign people projects. Let's say you've got a VA that's writing your stuff and you don't want them to see all of your projects. You could actually assign them that. And because this is a new thing, we want to say thank you to the people that have been using POP. The agency is actually at that $39 right now. So you can get in at $39 and get agency features forever. Sorry to pitch.
That
wasn't the point. The point was this is a good deal. And if $39 is in your range, this is a good thing to jump on, is the main point.
It's a really useful tool. I think the big thing for me with it is it takes practice to learn to use it right. And it's like any tool, you can use it completely wrong and make things a lot worse for yourself.
For sure.
Yeah, so take a look and definitely take the time to learn best practices.
Each iteration of the tool that comes out, though, what we strive for is to make it easier to do SEO and make it easier to understand. Those are our 2 big pushes, and that's what we are constantly striving. So within about 3 weeks, there's going to be a huge UX UI update. That's going to be that easier, and that's going to be a round of easiness. And then we've got what we're going to call Pop Express coming out in the next little bit, which will kind of basically take away the numbers for people that can't look at the numbers, and that just becomes too much, which I totally get. It's going to be a no numbers and just be like, just do this. We're going to have those. So we're constantly trying to make it easier for people to do SEO, but then we're also trying to make it easier for people that don't understand SEO so they can still get SEO copy and still get effective. That's a big thing. Effective SEO, like Moz and SEMrush and those guys, they have really easy to use tools, but they are not going to be effective. They can't show you all the data because their fear would be that you're going to use it and drop. We will take that risk, but because we want you to see all the data, because we want you to make it the most informed opinion, and seeing all that data, that's where you can get those edges. What we're trying to do is reduce the fail rate, where you can actually use that for harm rather than for good.
Have you got any advice as well on how to use a tool and prevent that confusion between what's making things rank? So like is it the on-page factors or is it the quality of the links that they have? Because quite often we see Amazon in #1 spot, but quite often as well their on-page is pretty dismal.
You would never want to put Amazon in. You're not Amazon. You never want to put Yelp in. You'd never want to put a Facebook page if that's ranking, or a YouTube video. Those things are ranking for other reasons. So like, when we said like a page is ranking because of its on-page, its off-page, or a combo, there are a few exceptions. Yelp is not ranking because of any of those things. They're in bed with Google. Facebook is not ranking for any of those things. YouTube videos, which is also Google, is not ranking. So those you'd never want to put those in as your competitors because they're not going to give you what you need to rank. So take those out of the equation for sure.
Yeah.
And then focus on the sites that look like you is kind of a general rule.
Yeah. Stop comparing apples to oranges and actually look at like for like.
Exactly. And that actually brings up a good point because some people are like, I'm trying to rank my home page, but it's all internal pages on page 1. Guess what? You should probably have an internal page. You're trying to rank something that Google doesn't want to rank. And it's that kind of analysis that you should be doing to make those even basic decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary of kind of the whole webinar. Really, is that start looking in general at what your competitors are doing and what Google actually likes, rather than just presuming we know best practices as SEOs and. Pretty much a lot of people are still guessing the right direction, whereas Google's telling us everything we need to know. We just need to spend that time to actually look.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely. I think that's all the questions we've got. So I appreciate you coming on, Kyle, and
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Bearing with us with the technical issues.
No problem.
Wicked. So. Thanks for all the affiliates attending. It will be in Facebook Live and it's also recorded, so we'll get that sent to anyone that couldn't attend. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Speak to you soon, guys.